Chapter 28, verses 401 through 500. 401. And all you're turning away from the creation, its laws and recommendations, and hence also from the effective truth, has had such a decisive and devastating effect on your views that you have created a cluelessness with regard to the real truth and the effective reality, become entangled in it, and therewith suggestively and forcefully brought about your own disaster. 402. Through wrong views which you often believe to be good, you have incurred evil effects in terms of interactions, which have brought you tremendous harm, because you acted against the creational laws and recommendations, which has, however, up to the present day not become clear to you. 403. The number of those of you acting and behaving in this wise has been huge since time immemorial. And in your presumptuousness and vanity, as well as wrong pride, you have brought over your world tormentful horror, terribleness, destruction, death, and ruin. And you do not know that the true life and the real truth and reality of all creational existence is completely different from what you think and imagine. 404. So you must act before it is too late and before you bring even more guilt upon yourselves, for which you will have to atone in processes lasting for decades, centuries, even millennia, if through your wrongdoing, actions, and activity, you create more and more hatred, jealousy, strife, terror, war, unfreedom, disharmony, unpeace, and vices, as well as pathological cravings. And therefore you will have to struggle to even be able to still live on your world which, through your constantly growing overpopulation and its effects, you destroy to such an extent that in the end your earth can no longer recover from it. 405. Truly, your way to the cognition is long and heavy, but if you have achieved the cognition, then the way you must go to create in yourselves the developmental change to the good, better, and best is even much longer and heavier. 406. The way is long and heavy. And if you neglect the favorable opportunity and in your unknowledge wantedly or unwantedly continue to load great guilt upon yourselves, then a bad end cannot be avoided. And during your doing, activity, and actions, always consider that if you do them in the unright, an excuse will have no weight, because the life itself does not accept any excuse for whatever unrightful and wrong things you do, because the life only knows the law of the causality, the cause and effect, as it is pre-given through the creational laws and recommendations. 407. Those of you human beings of Earth who feel the urge, in the course of the interactions cause and effect, to recognize and to understand the effects given through the creational laws and recommendations, must see them in the difference to the earthly views and make the effort to take an example out of your own existence for comparison and to examine where right and unright really are given. 408. And if this comprehensive examination is made and passed, then you will be able to unfold your own intellect and rationality capability more vividly and strongly in order to ultimately cast off everything with regard to learned prejudices of inadequate views and attitudes. 409. If this happens, then an understanding of fairness will therethrough be created in you which can rely on itself, and through which you, in your recognizing of all interactions, recognize and accept the creational laws and recommendations which then can widen and be active in you. 410. If you observe and consider yourselves with regard to the interactions, then you recognize that cause and effect also arise in you in a wise that corresponds to your attitude, and that guides you when you refer it to the past or future. 411. You amongst you human beings of Earth who live in the past with your attitude, you comprehend something only then, when it has already happened. And resulting out of this is that you can neither really enjoy nor get angry about what happened, nor can you logically follow and understand the whole severity of the whole case. 412. Only afterwards, after a longer time, when everything is already over, do you begin to make thoughts and feelings about it, and to talk about it, and to either worry about the past happening or to enthuse over it. 413. Therefore, you only talk of what lies in the past, feel good therein, or regret it. But in doing so, you completely overlook the new and present things that again come about. Because only when everything has already become old and moved into the past do you begin to have thoughts and feelings about the past happening and to value it. 414. And you amongst you human beings of Earth who with your attitude live in the near or far future, you only ever hope and wish for things that the future shall bring you. But in doing so, you forget that the present of your everyday life has a lot to offer you. At the same time, you also forget to make efforts in such a wise that you could let your wishes for the near and far future actually become reality. For 15, truly, many of you belong to the majority of your humankind who fritter away your life and lead no real and truthful life on earth. Nor do those amongst you who believe to live in the present, but have a completely wrong understanding of it. For 16, and those of you who wrongly understand the present, you spur yourselves every moment to recklessly encourage yourselves to the life and to live it to the fullest and enjoy it in an ausgeartet wise. And truly, there are many of you of this kind who thus tumble through your life in an affirming, jubilant, and senseless wise. For 17, it is right that you live your life in every minute and second to the fullest in an absolute wise, but not only in the outer and material realm, but also in your inner, in accordance with the true creational core of your inner nature, which you have covered over with the rubbish, the chaff of your self-created individuality. For 18, each second, minute, and hour of the present must become a real and truthful experiencing in your life, and indeed in the affliction as well as in the joy, in the fortune and in the unfortunate. For 19, with all your senses, thoughts, and feelings, you must be open and alert to that which you know as the present. Although the present is only short and only covers a short moment, you also have the present as your everyday life in which you live, are active, and act. For 20, only if you go towards the present of the moment and of the everyday life with openness and alertness, do you have an advantage from your earthly existence, an advantage that you create for yourselves. For 21, neither in the thoughts and feelings which are related to the past, nor in your dreams of the future, can you find a real and truthful living experience, because this is solely limited to the immediate present. And only the experiencing of the immediate present through living it is so full of energy and strong that it forms the consciousness, which integrates the advantage of the living experience into the actual life and furthers the consciousness-based evolution. For 22, if you do not co-live the present, then you also cannot ripen in yourselves, because the ripening depends on your practical experience and the living of the same, which is preceded by the perception, recognition, and cognizance as well as the knowledge, out of which altogether the essence, the wisdom, results. For 23, if during your life you do not experience the present through living it in your inner nature yourselves, then you are empty in yourselves and neglect the time, because you are not awake and because you do not make your life your own. For 24, your currently actual life on earth is only one of many steps in the development that you go through in the always returning existence of your spirit form and in the course of your always new personalities. And truly you cannot skip these steps, but you must climb one after the other. For 25, and if you do not stand strong and firm on the current step of your development in the life, then you will have great strain to climb up to the next step, because you will need the preceding step as a firm foundation. For 26, these steps correspond to your consciousness-based development state, and according to how this state is given, it will be possible for you to develop yourselves further and to climb up the next step. For 27, if you make a conscious effort to climb up the steps of your upward striving development during your existence one by one, then it will become clear to you that you can only reach the next step if you have correctly fulfilled the development on the preceding step. For 28, only through the full, absolute fulfillment of a development step is it possible to climb up to the next higher one. But if you do not fulfill it through the perception, the cognition, the cognizance, the knowledge, the practical experience, and its living, the taking in, comprehending, and experiencing it through living it in the present, then you cannot get the essence of the whole, i.e., the wisdom, which builds the state of the higher development reached. For 29, if you do not fulfill this developmental process through the real experiencing of the present through living it, namely in the realm of the material as well as in your inner and in the fine fluidal, then nothing can contribute to the ripeness in you. So you are from your present development step not able to recognize and step on the next one. Only with the equipment of the true experiencing of the present through living it in all domains of your existence, in your inner, in the fine fluidal and material, do you create the energy and power to perceive your next development step and also to climb up to it. For 30, in this wise it goes on and on through your entire actual life, and it went on like this in all your previous lives as always new personalities, And it will also be so in your new lives as new personalities, once you have left your present existence. For 31, truly, you need only look after your high fulfillments of your consciousness evolution, and hence pay due attention to your individual development steps which, for the purpose of your evolution, you must build and use yourselves in order to reach your fulfillment. For 32, the evolution steps, which you must create for yourselves and use for your climb up, must not be worked out cursorily. Otherwise, they easily break down as you try to climb up to the next step. However, you can react to the danger of the breaking down while climbing up to the next step, namely through the natural happening of this, that each higher development step can only be reached by fully developing the step of the present. For 33, if you therefore do not want to stand still on one development step for half of your life and do not want to keep falling back again and again, then you must make great efforts to always perceive the whole of the present in the material, in your inner and in the fine fluidal, to comprehend everything rightly, to experience and live it, and to build it up to the wisdom, so that you gain thereout evolutive, consciousness-based benefit. For 34. And if you act accordingly, then you will also not lack in earthly gains, because you make use of the advantage that you expect nothing else from space and time, and from your fellow human beings, than what they can really give you. And that is the reason why you will never be disappointed, and why you are able to live in love, peace, freedom, and harmony with yourselves as well as with your fellow human beings and the whole environment. For 35, but if you live not in the reality of the present, but instead with your thoughts and feelings in the past or in your dreams of the future, then your expectations will easily fall out of the frame of what is real and rational, because they reach beyond the reality of the present and hence create in you a disharmony from which you will then suffer, and indeed both in yourselves and in your nearer and wider surrounding area. For 36, you shall certainly think of that which lies in the past, but you shall not make it to celebrations and to constant memories. Rather, you shall only use it to learn thereout and to make everything better. For 37, equally, you can also dream of the future. However, you shall not wallow therein in unfulfillable wishes, nor in detrimental fantasies and illusions, so that you find a true incentive, through your future dreamings, to live consciously in the present and to dedicate yourselves to the upward swinging of your consciousness evolution. For 38, the upward swinging, the climb up to your consciousness evolution does not have any distinct rule, so no specific way can be directed in this respect. A directed way would be like a template in which there would be nothing living, and consequently nothing living could arise out of it that is absolutely necessary for the upward swinging, because only that which is living can again create something living. For 39, if you want to climb up to the consciousness evolution, then you can only do that on your own individual way, which is formed for you alone. And therefore a directed way would be the individual way of someone else, and would only be an outer, weak crutch for you, on which you could not walk rightly and autonomously, because it serves neither for the perceiving, nor for the seeing and the recognizing, but rather only for the handicapped movement. 440. Therefore you must search for your own way and see it clearly and precisely before you, so that you do not go forward upon it blindly. 441. But if you take on a suggested way, which you do not find yourselves, then you will go forward on it limpingly and blindly, because you will simply follow a new dogma which had been talked into you, instead of you giving the necessary guidelines to yourselves through which you tread your own way to truth, knowledge, and wisdom, and therewith to the consciousness evolution. 442. And consider, if you want to get into the realm of your consciousness and therethrough give enough consideration to its evolution, then you must naturally search for, find, and go to the way thereto yourselves, because it cannot be shown to you by anyone, and it also does not come to you on its own. 443. Your consciousness is in the lowness of your coarse substantialness, the highest factor of your possible development. Therefore, you must do everything in this coarse substantialness in order to get the best possible height of your consciousness evolution. Therefore, you must wander through the coarse substantial in order to reach your fulfillment. 444. So that you do not go astray on your way to the consciousness evolution, it is necessary that you precisely research and know the way you have to tread and to wander through. However, you must not only know the way itself, but also let everything become conscious to you. What can come across you on the way, which dangers can threaten you, and which help you can find. 445. And since the whole way lies only in you yourselves, in your own consciousness, and in the thereout resulting thoughts and their feelings, you must find and recognize it alone, if you want to come to the fulfillment. 446. Truly, there is no human being who could describe to you your individual way that is necessary for your rise up to your consciousness evolution. So there is nobody who could make your own way to the highest form of your development clearly visible and recognizable to you except you yourselves. 447. The way to that height, which lies in the realm of your consciousness as temple of your highest possible development, is the way to your well-being, to your true love, harmony, and freedom, as well as to the true peace in yourselves, and that alone is the reality. 448. Since time immemorial, the message of the true prophets has shown you, through the goblet of the truth, the teaching of the prophets, the teaching of the truth, the teaching of the Spirit, the teaching of the life, the right way to the upward swinging with regard to your consciousness evolution, but the teaching was always wrongly interpreted by you through your human, overbearing wanting to be clever. You have falsified the teaching beyond recognition and made out of it religions, ideologies, and philosophies, as well as a signpost which has led you to the belief in godheads, 10 gods, and idolized human beings. And through this you have misleadingly turned yourselves to the greatest erroneous assumption which you could have made since your existence, and which has prevented you from treading the way of the effective truth consciously and willingly, and from giving enough consideration to the creational laws and recommendations and the consciousness evolution. 449. It is now finally time for you to consciously decide for the effective truth and for the height of the consciousness evolution in which you can swing upwards and irrevocably find your way out of the lowness of your truth and knowledge, and indeed without possibility of you falling back again into your old habits at some later time. 450. Therefore, the message of the truth is brought to you once again, so that you turn your wrongly positioned signpost in the right direction and are earnest searchers, so that you find, recognize, and follow the way of the truth in yourselves, which is both the way of the truth itself and the fulfillment. 451. Good for you, therefore, if you are open in your senses and you consciously direct your thoughts and feelings accordingly. Because if you do this, then you will learn about the truth of all truth as well as the creational laws and recommendations which, for your consciousness, serve as rungs for the upward swinging in order to consciously enter the realm of your consciousness evolution. 452. In your consciousness and in your thereout resulting thoughts and their feelings alone, you find everything you need to create your capabilities through which you can climb up into the heights of your consciousness evolution. 453. It is first your true life, which you must live, that gives you the dynamic and the freedom for the development of the necessary capabilities which are necessary for the climbing up into the heights of the consciousness evolution, and through which you can free yourselves from the yoke of your fixed religious, ideological, and philosophical dogmas which make you into will-less slaves of your belief in a God, 10 God, or human being whom you raise to the status of a divinity, where through you suppress yourselves and hinder the rise up to the high evolution of the consciousness and exterminate every possibility of the consciousness development. 454. If you are human beings who know the truth and the creational laws and recommendations in their mode of functioning, then you also understand therein the great creation idea. And if you adapt the right attitude, then only the truth of all truth serves you, which alone proceeds from out of the creation universal consciousness, and hence also the way of the truth to the rise up to the consciousness evolution, because you fulfill the creation-given laws and recommendations and therefore live rightly. 455. And if you follow the creation idea and thus the truth of all truth, then you do not squirm remorsefully, kneelingly, prayingly, beggingly, submissively, sanctimoniously, hypocritically, and beseechingly before your God, 10 God, or idolized human being. Because if you live in accordance with the creation idea and the creation-given laws and recommendations, then you live practicing it in a fresh, joyful, and pure activity. Therefore you do not beg whiningly and beseechingly for the effective truth of all truth. Rather you go through life seeingly and joyfully, and you recognize reality and live in consideration and fulfillment of the creational laws and recommendations, and therefore in responsible fullness with regard to the consciousness evolution. 456. And if you live in this wise, then your life will look entirely different from how you have so far seen and lived it, namely in accordance with the truth, law-fulfilling and well-disposed towards the recommendations, much freer and more beautiful with which you stand in the midst of the creation universal consciousness as corresponds to the creation idea. 457. Finally, and really accept the truth as it is given to you through the teaching of the prophets, through the goblet of the truth. And do not take everything as a picture and imagination, but as true reality and implicitness, and in place of the hazy schemes of your belief in your gods, 10 gods, angels, saints, and human beings whom you deify, and put on an equal footing with your fabulated gods and 10 gods. 458. Therefore learn to recognize the truth and to follow it, because only through doing so do you learn about the love of the creation universal consciousness as well as the thereout resulting laws and recommendations which you shall follow, because only therein is the way in yourselves given, the way that leads to the height of your consciousness evolution, which is anchored in the primeval law of the creation as constant motion. 459. If you look around, you human beings of earth, you can see and recognize how you shall really live, because if you go around with open senses, then it is not difficult for you to recognize the primeval laws of the continuing motion of the creation universal consciousness and all its creations, creatures, and everything existent. And if you make an effort to pay attention to everything around you in a right wise, then you reveal multifarious secrets which are hidden in the creational laws and recommendations, and hence also in the creation idea. 460. Know that in the creation universal consciousness the motion is a fundamental law in which is included everything that has ever been conceived and created by it. 461. The motion is therefore the fundamental and primeval law of the creation universal consciousness and all its creations, i.e. created creations and everything existent. So hence this law is also valid for you human beings of earth, but you have ignored the law of the right motion and use it wrongly. 462. Already when the creation had created its idea, the primeval law of the motion was created in it, through which since the very beginning everything was formed and continues to be formed, because the unceasing motion is the becoming as well as the preservation, and the passing as well as the rebecoming of all things, and everything happening in the entire realm of the creation universal consciousness. 463. This means that also you human beings of earth cannot, in the midst of the all-life-giving motion, be observed and considered as an exception amongst all the creations, i.e., created creations, creatures, and everything existent created by the creation universal consciousness, because you cannot stand still in the creation given and incessantly continuing motion, and you cannot go your own ways without you taking harm for yourselves. 464. There are very many amongst you who only relax and lead a comfortable life, and who regard comfortableness and idleness as the crowning moment of your life, especially in your older years when you particularly ought to be striving for the life wisdom in order to pass it on to the younger generation. 465. But what you achieve with the comfortableness and with the idleness is pure poison for the evolution of your consciousness, namely the beginning of the end of your consciousness evolution, which you shall create consciously. 466. If you rightly open your eyes and your senses for your life, for your evolution, and for your surrounding area, then you recognize thereby a great deal, perceive a lot of things, and gain cognitions, cognizance, and knowledge, out of which practical experience and the living of the same and ultimately wisdom results, through which you advance the evolution of your consciousness. And if you are alert and attentive, then you recognize in everything a distinct reason and a creation-given law in all happenings. 467. If you really only sit and rest in your life, and only want to rest from all your activity until the end of your life, then you push away the rhythmic law of the always valid motion as it is given in all things through the creation universal consciousness. 468. And through your comfortableness and idleness with regard to the evolution of the consciousness, you push yourselves away from the rhythmic motions of the creation, just like an overripe fruit falling from the tree. And the reason is that all the swinging and motion around you is much stronger than the motion in yourselves, which ought to conform to the outer swinging waves, i.e. motions. 469. And you all amongst you human beings of earth who act in this wrong wise, you fall ill and tire out because your own swinging waves, Your own motions and your conscious awakeness cannot keep pace with the ruling motion of the creation universal consciousness. Truly, you can only stay fresh, joyful, and healthy if you integrate yourselves into and adjust yourselves to the rhythm of the creational universal motion. For 70. The term interruption alone means stagnation, i.e. standstill, and let's intuit the great law of the creation-given motion, in which the becoming and passing and the rebecoming are included. For 71. Motion is upbuilding and preservation, i.e. creating and preserving, as well as further development right up to a distinct destination. For 72. But those amongst you all who literally want to sit and rest in your life, you have no destination in front of you, and you yourselves set the end in your volition, where through you withdraw yourselves from the creation swinging, i.e. the creation-determined motion, and are no longer capable of any consciousness evolution. And this in spite of the fact that the evolution of the consciousness has no end. You, however, hinder the natural motion of this evolution and ignore the enduring development which is motion is given in the law of the creation idea. But you cannot do this without suffering harm, because the ignoring leads to the stagnation which hits you with blatant truth unknowledgeness. For 73. And as an allegory to show that those amongst you lead a life in true joy and in the well-being who live in accordance with the truth and the creational laws and recommendations, the following is said. Those amongst you all who constantly have to labor hard for your earthly living with your hands, you are usually healthier and live to be older than those amongst you all who are, from their youth on, pamperingly protected and nursed in a careful kind, and those amongst you all who were brought up in prosperity and do everything possible for your body, your psyche, and your nerves to make sure that you can live comfortably without disturbance and strain. It is you who are more quickly exposed to the outer signs of the oncoming old age than those who are not endowed with earthly goods and who must fulfill their existence in the sweat of their face. For 74. Those amongst you who lead a work-rich life in which there is no unnecessary exaggeration and no frantic pathological craving for the amassing of material treasures, as well as no self-emphasizing, you have a good life. But those amongst you who make yourselves the slaves of such pathological craving, you suffer from constant disturbance and therefore act completely disharmonious in the creational motion, i.e. swinging wave. Therefore there is also here a golden middle way for each of you, so you can live in the swinging wave of the creation on earth rightly and for yourselves in a content and favorable wise. And consider thereby what you do. You shall do it totally and amply, and leave nothing to be desired. Because the greatest terribleness against a harmonious fulfillment of the life is a one-sidedness. For 75, consider a work-rich life without the fulfillment of the consciousness evolution is of no advantage to you, because your earthly body may well swing with the motion of the creation. However, your consciousness lies dormant, stands still, and stagnates in terms of the evolution. For 76, but if your consciousness does not move forward in an evolving wise, and indeed in harmony with the swinging waves of the creation, i.e., with the creation-determined motion which pulses through everything, then no preservation and hardening of your body takes place through your labor, but instead it ages quickly, wears down, and becomes exhausted. Because the truth is that your material body must be in harmony with your consciousness evolution. 477. If your material body lacks the energy and power of your consciousness because the latter stagnates, then this standstill holds back the blossoming of the body and hinders it from keeping healthy, because the body, without the consciousness evolution, uses itself up in its own swinging waves, i.e. motions, wilts and decays. Therefore, it can no longer renew itself because it lacks the power source, the motions, i.e. swinging waves of the evolution of the consciousness. Therefore, it is useless if you move only physically, but leave the evolutionary motion of your consciousness out of your attention. For 78, it is useless if you do no work and make no effort concerning your consciousness evolution. And indeed, also then, if, to exercise your body, you regularly undergo fitness trainings and go for walks and do all sorts of other things to keep your body in shape, because truly it ages quickly nevertheless and decays, if it does not live in the same swinging wave, i.e. motion with the evolving consciousness. For 79, the consciousness motion, i.e. the swinging wave of the consciousness is determined through the conscious effort of the learning and the thereout resulting development, i.e. evolution, which is reached through the achievement of a destination consisting of distinct factors and which moves the consciousness. Because energy and power are transferred to the body, and the body transfers again its energy and power as well as perseverance to the consciousness. 480. The fulfillment of the consciousness must not be searched for in the material, but rather in its evolution, from which also the spirit form gains evolutionary benefit, and this benefit carries itself into the creation universal consciousness and is in turn beneficial for its evolution. This, however, is a fulfillment of the consciousness evolution, which is far beyond all earthly matters and which is carried far beyond your earthly existence. 481. The fulfillment of your consciousness, the evolution, must live in you and be dynamic in you, because otherwise it has nothing in common with your consciousness. 482. But the truth is that you human beings of Earth of today no longer know what your consciousness actually is, because on account of the wrong teachings of your wrong prophets, religions, ideologies, and philosophies, you have put the spirit, i.e. the spirit form, in its place, which you erroneously and wrongly assume to be responsible for your ideas, thoughts, feelings, as well as your activity, actions, and doing. But that is not the truth, because not your spirit, i.e. not your spirit form, is responsible for this, but your consciousness, for which and for whose entire activity and the thereout resulting intellect and rationality you yourselves bear the full responsibility. 483. Truly, your spirit, i.e. your spirit form, is not identical with your consciousness and is not of an earthly, material kind, but rather of a pure creational spiritual nature and untouchable for you. Nevertheless, you erroneously assume that your consciousness given intellect and your rationality are of a spiritual nature, and with this assumption you cling to a traditional or rational teaching of a religious, ideological, and philosophical kind which finishes off your intellect and your rationality and brings about a downfall into non-understanding and truth unknowledge, to which you cling and cannot perceive and recognize the real truth. 484. Your earthly existence requires the fulfillment of the life sense, which consists of bringing your consciousness evolution to the highest possible level of love, knowledge, and wisdom. That is the sense of the life and the fulfillment, into which all furthering values of the consciousness development must be brought for the purpose of this, that therethrough also your spirit, i.e. your spirit form, can take over these high values, to ultimately bring them into the creation universal consciousness, which as a result also evolves. But be conscious that all love, all knowledge, and all wisdom, which you create for yourselves and which go over into your spirit, i.e. your spirit form, are always only relatively absolutely fully developed, as are also the love, the knowledge, and the wisdom of the creation universal consciousness. Truly, there is nothing absolutely fully developed, but only relatively absolutely fully developed, because everything is in constant motion and develops always further and higher, including you with your consciousness, your spirit, i.e. your spirit form and its spiritual creational energy and power, and the creation universal consciousness in its spiritual energetic being. That is the truth which you must realize, recognize, and know, because this truth is an eternity value, an all-time value, and hence nothing that is only passing. 485. And if you want to act, and howsoever you want to act, whatever you are striving for, and whatever you are making an effort for, always ask yourselves first whether the whole corresponds to the effective relative truth, because truth, too, is not absolutely fully developed, but is always only relatively given, and indeed because the one truth always entails the next following truth, because truly the truth is also in swinging motion. Hence it constantly widens if new knowledge and new wisdom come to it. Therefore also the real truth of all truth is not absolutely, but only relatively absolutely fully developed, although for you human beings it nevertheless builds the highest value of the currently fathomable and reachable truth, which however through the learning can in turn be worked through with further knowledge and further wisdom to a new relative highest level of the truth. 486. Truly, also the real truth of all truth is in constant swinging motion, because a widened knowledge and a widened wisdom lead to new truth cognitions, each of which in its relative highest level builds the real truth of all truth. Therefore, the real truth of all truth keeps widening further and further, and indeed entirely according to the increasing evolution, which also always reaches its highest relative level, which in turn reaches a new relative highest level when new knowledge and thereout resulting wisdom comes to it. The evolution of love, knowledge, and wisdom, as well as the real truth of all truth, thus never come to an end, but continue to increase ever further and higher into all duration of the endlessness. 487. Therefore, if you want to act consciously, no matter what you are striving and endeavoring for, then ask yourselves about the true relative value and the relative real truth of all truth which results out of the whole, so that you may really find everything in the right wise and know that every real truth of all truth, as well as every value of the knowledge and the wisdom, is always only a level that leads to the next higher level, because through swinging motion, everything constantly develops further and never comes to an end in all endlessness of the endless duration. And all this is not all too difficult to understand, if only you make a conscious and willing effort to gain the understanding. 488. Do not rely on the wrong teachings of the religions, ideologies, and philosophies, and not on the useless striving for pseudo-cognitions of the same kind as they are presented to you, because truly they are a hindrance to the climb up to your consciousness evolution, because they prevent the truth fathoming in you and bring the motion to a standstill. And as a result, each progress and each development is thwarted and cannot be brought to success. 489. Also, with regard to your sciences, you shall thoroughly think about them, because through them you cannot unfold your swings of the motions. Rather, they are badly curtailed and destroyed through them, because they run after wrong cognitions and do not perceive and do not recognize the real truth of the creation universal consciousness and its laws and recommendations nor their effects, but instead try to explain everything only on the basis of their scientific physical cognitions, which relate to the purely material factors and do not pay attention to, nor understand, and consequently also cannot explain, all the fine fluidal and spirit energetical. 490. Truly, the whole truth of all truth does not lie in the material sciences alone, but fundamentally and first and foremost in the spirit energetical realm, which is created through the creation universal consciousness. And the truth of all truth does not lie in complicated physical, religious, ideological, political, and philosophical formulas, but in the simplicity of all things as they are given through the creational laws and recommendations. And therefore, the true simplicity also lies in the thoughts and feelings and in the truthfully activity of you human beings, which is in accordance with the creation, just as the greatness lies in you yourselves, through which you unfold the might of your responsibility and integrate it into the following of the laws and recommendations of the creation universal consciousness, which you shall strive for consciously and in love. But you humankind of earth, you have turned away from the creational truth and instead turned to your religions, ideologies, philosophies, and your material sciences, and believe yourselves great in your purely material rationality and intellect-based knowledge. 491. Truly, you have bound yourselves to your material sciences and your belief in gods, tin gods and idolized human beings, and have obstructed yourselves against the real truth of the existence of the creation and its laws and recommendations. 492. Consider this. Of what use is it to you if you squander away the time of your earthly life with the attempt of wanting to find out when and how such a tiny creature as a louse came into being and how long it will continue to exist for, if you thereby completely forget to research the creational laws and recommendations and to live according to them and according to the truth which is given therein? Truly, your entire material searching and researching is of no use to you if you leave the creational spiritual energy and power, and hence the highest possible truth of all truth, out of your attention. 493. Truly, you must seriously and thoroughly examine one thing after the other to find out which value it brings you as excellence. 494. And if you examine everything very accurately, then you will suddenly recognize that everything therein that today does not take place according to the creational laws and recommendations breaks down like a useless house of cards, and shows you that your earthly existence, which is given to you as a gift for your consciousness evolution, is, with regard to the evolution, the learning of the truth, the creating of the love, knowledge, and wisdom, truthfully much too precious to leave unused, even for a single minute. For 95, do not wallow in your vanity and your gambling, because they have nothing in them through which you would be able to raise yourselves evolutively into the effective truth, because vanity and gambling are only empty and dead in themselves. For 96, do not be megalomaniacal and do not assume that you could raise yourselves up to the creation universal consciousness, because even if you become very knowing and wise and can manipulate the life and change it through genetic engineering, you are nevertheless only creations, i.e., created creations of the creation universal consciousness, and you will never get beyond that as material human beings. For 97, truly, in the creation universal consciousness, in which you live as its creations, you shall complete, in fulfillment of its laws and recommendations, actions, and an activity of the evolution of your consciousness. Therefore, you shall step out of your delusion of your self-boastfulness and fulfill your duty. For 98, if you look at and consider yourselves, then you are only like sounding or with your wrong knowledge and the unknowledge of the effective creational truth of all truth, whereas your real existence should be an aliveness and a furthering of your evolutionary task. For 99, and if you enjoy life and thankfully direct your senses upon it and upon the truth, then you stand higher than those who knowingly take apart their existence and unconcernedly go forth without recognizing the greatness of the creation. 500. Look around you, you human beings of Earth, because it depends on how you realize the life, your own activity, and your fellow human beings, and what they mean to you in reality, and what value they have for you.